You know the feeling. It starts as a small, quiet thought in the back of your mind during a conversation that should be normal. You're looking at someone you've known for years, maybe a friend, a partner, or a parent, and suddenly you feel 1,000 miles away. You realize that the energy it takes to bridge that gap is energy you simply no longer have. So, you do the only thing that feels safe. You stop responding. You stop showing up. You walk away without a backward glance. If you are the person who has been left, it feels like a cold, confusing rejection that leaves you questioning everything. But if you are the one doing the cutting, it feels like something else entirely. It feels like survival. Today, we're going on a journey into the quiet architecture of the door slam. We're going to look at why some people reach a point where they would rather be alone forever than spend one more minute being misunderstood. We're exploring the psychology of the cutoff, and by the end of this, you'll understand that this isn't just about ghosting. It's about the hidden limits of the human heart. The myth of the sudden decision. There is a common misconception that cutting someone off is an impulsive, angry act. From the outside, it looks like a lightning strike. One day they were there, and the next, their number is blocked and their seat at the table is empty. But for the person walking away, this wasn't a sprint, it was a marathon. The point: cutting people off is rarely a choice, it is a collapse. The emotional explanation. When we talk about cutting off, what we're really talking about is emotional burnout. Imagine a cup being filled drop by drop. A small criticism here, a boundary crossed there, a feeling of being unheard for the 100th time. The person doesn't leave when the cup is full, they leave when it finally overflows. By the time they actually walk away, they have usually been mourning the relationship in secret for months. A relatable example. Think of a friendship where you always felt like the listener. You knew their secrets, their fears, and their coffee order. But one day, you realized that they didn't know yours. You tried to speak up, but they talked over you. You tried to distance yourself slowly, but they pulled you back in with guilt. Eventually, your brain realized that the only way to stop the drain was to shut the power off entirely. The next step. But if it's a slow build-up, why does it feel so cold when it finally happens? The answer lies in a psychological defense that changes how we view safety. The safety of the void. For many who cut others off, the act of leaving isn't about hurting the other person, it's about finding air. For some, the cutoff is a learned defense mechanism used to handle feeling overwhelmed. In psychology, some people view intimacy as a threat to their freedom. When a relationship gets too heavy, too much conflict, or too many expectations, their nervous system enters a state of high alert. To them, the other person starts to feel like a cage. Cutting them off isn't an act of cruelty, it's the act of someone breaking out of a prison they feel trapped in. A relatable example. Imagine you're wearing a wool sweater that's just a little too itchy. At first, you can ignore it, but as the day goes on, it starts to feel like it's burning your skin. You don't carefully unpick the threads, you rip the sweater off because you can't stand the sensation for one more second. That itch is the feeling of being perceived or obligated to someone else. The next step. But what happens when the person cutting everyone off isn't doing it out of fear, but out of a desperate need to protect a version of themselves they finally started to love? The boundary of last resort. We are often told that healthy people communicate. We're told that if we have a problem, we should sit down and talk it out. But what happens when you've tried to talk and the words fell on deaf ears? The point. Cutting someone off is often the final boundary for people who were never allowed to have small ones. The emotional explanation. If you grew up in an environment where saying no resulted in punishment or being told you were too sensitive, you learned that your voice has no power. You learned that trying to negotiate only leads to being manipulated. For these individuals, the cutoff is the only boundary that cannot be argued with. It is a silent no that finally sticks. A relatable example. Think of someone who has a difficult parent. For years, they tried to set small rules like, please don't call me after 9 p.m., or please don't comment on my weight. The parent ignored every single one. The child realizes that as long as a door is cracked open, the parent will push through it. So they weld the door shut. The next step. This leads us to a painful truth. Is it possible to be too good at cutting people off? There's a dark side to this protection. The hyperindependence trap. There's a specific kind of pride that comes with being done with people. It feels like strength. It feels like you've finally taken control of your life. But sometimes this strength is actually a mask for deep hurt. The point. Chronic cutting off can lead to hyperindependence, where you believe that needing anyone is a danger. The emotional explanation. When you've been hurt enough times, your brain creates a shortcut. It decides that relationships are high risk. To prevent future pain, you start cutting people off at the first sign of friction. A small disagreement? Gone. A missed text? Blocked. You become a collector of endings, because endings are the only thing you can control. A relatable example. You meet someone new. Things are going well. Then they make a joke that lands wrong. Instead of talking about it, you feel a wave of disgust. You tell yourself they weren't the right fit anyway, and walk away before they can walk away from you. You've won, but you're standing alone. The next step. If this sounds like you might wonder, is there a way back? Or are we destined to keep shrinking our world until there's no one left? The grief of the ghost. We need to talk about the silence that follows the cut. It's not as quiet as it seems. The point, the person who cuts others off often suffers from unprocessed grief. When you cut someone out, you don't just lose a person, you lose a version of yourself. You lose the memories and the shared jokes. Because there was no final conversation, the brain struggles to file the relationship away. It stays open in the back of your mind, draining your emotional energy even if you think you're over it. For example, you might find yourself months later hearing a song and your first instinct is to tell that person. Then the realization hits. You can't. You chose this. The weight of that choice is a heavy, invisible backpack you carry every day, even if you're certain you made the right call. The next step. This brings us to the most important question. How do we distinguish between a healthy ending and just running away? The path to discernment. The goal of self-awareness isn't to make you stop cutting people off. Sometimes cutting someone off is the most self-loving thing you can do. The goal is to make sure you are doing it with intention, not just out of fear. The point. Real growth happens when we can sit in the discomfort of a conflict without running. It involves asking, is this person actually hurting me, or is my fear just making me want to leave? If the person is genuinely harmful, the cutoff is your shield. If the person is just human and flawed, the cutoff might be your cage. A relatable example. Next time you feel the urge to disappear, try a micro boundary first. Say, it hurt my feelings when you said that. See what they do. If they listen, you've saved a connection. If they dismiss you, you can walk away knowing you didn't just run, you stood your ground first. You are not cold. If you are someone who has had to cut people off to survive, I want you to hear this. You are not a monster. Society often judges the person who leaves. We are told to stick it out no matter what. But loyalty to someone who treats you poorly is just a slow way of losing yourself. If you had to walk away to find your peace, then your peace was worth the price. You are allowed to protect your energy. Your worth is not measured by how much pain you can tolerate. However, if you find yourself lonely and wondering where everyone went, know that it is also okay to start letting people back in, slowly. The world is full of people who are capable of hearing your no and respecting it. You don't have to disappear to be safe. You just have to be seen by the right eyes. Would you like me to help you write a message for someone you want to set a micro boundary with instead of cutting them off?